I mean, I guess it brings me back to my childhood, right? Just allowing a little girl that never knew what love really felt like to be able now to give it to someone else in a way that they've never felt.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. And if you haven't already, go check out my Hip Habits workbook. It is 6 months of weekly habits, including everything from mindfulness challenges to physical health challenges. You can see all of that if you go click on the link in show notes. Today, you're going to hear from Bonnie VanDusen. She is the founder of the Geronimo Project. She is really focused on changing the conversation around trauma, around child abuse, and the foster care system. She is a mom. She is a foster care mom, and she's also an adoptive mom. In the last 5 years, she has fostered more than 27 children. In this conversation, we're going to talk about some of the child abuse that she has survived, what she did after being sexually and physically abused by her father, how she was able to take a different route than a lot of people who go through that take, how she's been able to bring children into her home that have dealt with abuse, what she's learned about trauma, about love, and really how that love, that definition has changed throughout her life. It was one thing when she was a kid, and it is a lot different now today. There's so much in this conversation. I haven't even given you all of it here as I talk, but let's just get right into it. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
I thought of you because of how love has evolved throughout your life. Will you tell me a little bit about that change on the definition of what love is, of what you thought it was and what you know it to be now?
Okay, so I am a child abuse survivor, and so as a child, the representation of what love was something that was very not given properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my father physically and sexually abused me, and so the language of love is totally different than what we are sold as women or what society says love should look like. It was really misconstrued. Construed? Yeah,
Construed.
Construed. There you go. Thank you. And so growing up, my love language was, and it still is, acts of service, because that's what I was taught. My value is what I produced, not that I was loved unconditionally. And so now, as a trauma survivor, I've put the work in, and as a foster parent, love is something that is just give and not take. It's something that I'm willing to give and sacrifice, not to get it from someone else, but it's because of what I was called to do. We were called to love one another. And so that is really helps to be able to walk along other side of people that are in really yucky places and not have the expectation that I need to love you because I'm going to receive something in return, but I'm going to love you because that's what my life is worth giving to you. Like, I would rather give you everything instead of just walking by and not seeing you, because that's what saved me. I had someone in the community see what was happening to me, and she was a complete stranger. And on that day, I had actually decided I was going to kill myself. And she was a new manager at the job I was working at when I was 16. And she just saw something that no one had seen in my day-to-day life. And she basically pulled me aside and said, "You have two options. I'm calling the cops or you're calling someone else. So what are you doing?" And so I really believe in living in that place of your smile, your greeting, the way that we interact with people can really change how someone's life comes in full circle.
Mm-hmm. In that moment where that manager took you aside and said this, and didn't she give you a letter as well? Is she the one who gave you a letter?
So you're talking about the letter later on. That was
Okay.
Lindsay McPhail.
Oh, I'm talking to her at 9.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So, she had the Fearless
Mhm.
experiment book, and I had actually just become a new believer, and I wasn't 100% sold on the religious aspect. I wanted a relationship because relationships have always been super hard in my life. I wonder why,
Mhm.
and so for me, I didn't want to say yes to the Lord because that's what someone expected me to do. I wanted it because I really wanted to be adopted, a part of a family, and to love unconditionally, no strings attached, because I had never had that before. And so I went on a retreat with no one. I had found Lindsay on Facebook, and she was doing one of her strike getaways. And in full fashion of the way that my walk is with the Lord. Basically, she had prayed over every woman that was going to this retreat, and the word that she had heard
Mm.
for me was Geronimo, and which is really, it's not a very Christian-y word, right? You get faith or blessed or grace is a normal word, and so I was like, really, like, hey Lord, thanks, and but that whole weekend, her focus was Geronimo. So she was playing the song nonstop. She was, just constantly, I was hearing this, and it really allowed me to step into this place of no expectations and just be really present with him and hear what he was calling me to do. And then coming home after receiving that letter from her, I dug in deeper to who Geronimo was, who the Indian leader Geronimo was. And he was known for changing the battle plan for his people. He went against what was expected of him for his people. He sat and heard from the Lord in ways that no one else could hear. He also had supposedly, bullets coming at him, and magically he was protected. And I look at that as like what the world can throw at me, but I was still protected in what we've been walking through with our walk through foster care.
Mhm. And you changed your plan.
Yeah, I
You
changed my
you
plan.
absolutely changed what was occurring in your life. Something that had been put into motion by your dad,
Hmm.
and you changed that. I think that
Yeah.
is really, really incredible.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
right before you, okay, I wanted to ask you, when that manager took you aside, you're the 16-year-old girl.
Hmm.
In that moment, did you feel like you were cared about? Did you feel like you mattered when you noticed this manager come to you?
I think that I was just at the end of my ropes, and I
Mm,
was desperate for someone to see me, and a complete stranger did. And
mhm,
so, I can't, when I share with people, I always feel like even though I accepted the Lord later on in my life, I always felt he was there with me. Because there
mhm,
are times in situations when my dad was stepping over boundaries that I could feel a sense of peace. That I could feel a sense of protection. And I just feel like in that moment, my only other option was I was going home to kill myself. And so I think just everything came in, and I felt seen and safe, and I was able to just finally go, here, thank you. Thank you. You know, um
mhm.
so yeah.
I was gonna ask you how you got through that abuse. It sounds like at least that's part of the answer, is that you felt some kind of peace. Tell me
There
about that.
was definitely a sense of peace, but I also had siblings. I had younger siblings in my home. I was the oldest, and I stayed for a long time because I felt I needed to protect them.
Mm,
And so there was, because those siblings were actually between my dad and my stepmom. If I left, they weren't coming with me.
mm,
And so um, I had to, in that split decision, make the choice that, like, okay, if I leave, if I call and go to a safe place, what am I doing to my siblings? What am I leaving them with? Or will someone finally see like what is actually going on in our home? And, you know, sadly, in the 90s, abuse wasn't something that was really talked about, right? It was kind of just like, oh, that's discipline. Um, and so no one saw it until 3 years later. I got a phone call from my stepmom, and my dad was bipolar, which I found out many years later, and he was self-medicating with substance. And he had a major episode, and he actually tried to kill my stepmom and my siblings. And so he actually served 11 years for attempted premeditated murder. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah. So that,
Wow.
there's a lot of shame and guilt that you carry
Mhm.
in those moments. Um, and so, but there's a plan. There was a
Yeah.
connection. I look in the long run. So
When I think of a young woman carrying the burden of trying to keep your siblings safe, it just my heart just aches. Tell me about when you look back at that young woman you were, what some of the things you think about her are.
um, I mean, I just give her grace.
Yeah.
Um, I feel bad. I feel bad for her in a sense because again, there are things society thinks that when you go through certain traumas, as an adult, you don't carry those traumas. We look at people that are homeless, or we look at people that are drug abuse users, and we see that it's their choice. But most of the time, what we've seen in the foster care system, and it's generational. In Oregon, kids that grow up in the system, they're kicked out when they're basically 18.
Mm.
And homelessness is a huge thing, and so it's a cycle. You see these kids raise up generational. They don't know any better, then they're kicked out at 18, and their only thing to turn to is sex trafficking or drug abuse. And so my conversation a lot is, why me? Like, why? My story? Me and my husband are very, we walk alongside people that are like in Celebrate Recovery, or we walk along our bio parents, because there's no difference between us and them. Just at some point in our life, we took a different turn. My husband is a recovering addict. I have my own addictions when it comes to self-pleasing or pleasing others, or the voice inside my head, right? Those are addictions. Your coffee, your Pepsi, your smoking, those are all addictions. One is just classified different by society. One's acceptable, one's not, you
Mhm.
know? So I I look at that girl and I wonder how she survived. But I also look at that girl and go, gosh, I wish I was as strong as her now, because society has told me I need to live inside this box. And that girl didn't. She was quiet, but she fought back. And so I don't think people understand the strength that it takes to live in that, but also to try to grow out of that
Mhm.
situation.
Mhm. I can't imagine the strength that that has required.
Mhm.
Do you see yourself in some of these bio parents that when you take in a foster kid and you learn about their story and where they came from, do you see yourself in them?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, when you get a phone call for a child, you know that they're coming into the system because of abuse or neglect, right? And so my human nature is, oh, how disgusting. Like, how could you ever treat your kid this way? How could you do this? Um, and so you have that misconception of who they are. But then when you actually sit with them at a life meeting, or you meet and start getting little pieces of their story, you see again, they were abused by their parents. Their parents didn't have skills. Their parents, got them high at 13. So I see, again, it goes back to like, what's the difference? Where was the moment that my life changed, and where's the moment that their life changed? And so what we really do when we walk alongside bio parents is, and a lot of our friends in recovery have told us this, and we know that boundaries are key to success. And so we as a foster parent will sit here and say, look, and a lot of them are surprised when they see my husband leading Celebrate Recovery worship. They're like, wait, what are you doing here? And, are they, when we share our story with them, like, oh, like, because they think we're here and they're here. And we're like, no, no, we've just invested in ourselves differently. And so, when you start hearing their story, you start fighting for them too. And you start saying like, okay, what you're choosing right now is not a good skill. So let me show you what you should do, what you can do. And here's the resources. And, not all of them are willing and accepting of that. We've adopted our son because of that. But I also have success stories where we've had a bio parent get her son back, and we don't really interact afterwards. I really try to believe in we're there for a season. And if they ever need us, come back. And she did. A few months later, about 6 months later, she came back and she relapsed. And she was safe enough to ask us if we were willing to take the kids so that the state didn't have to get involved so she can get treatment. And I was like, yep, let's go. Like, what can we do to help you succeed? So yeah, I see them every day.
Wow. Do you think part of what you do with foster care is for the parents?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I had someone to step in and mentor and fight for me in certain ways, they've lost everything. And more so I can relate to them because we lost our son, Dominic, when we were trying to adopt him. The state had a false assessment against us, and they showed up at my doorstep and said we would never see him again. And I was his mom for 4 years. Like, we've raised him. And so, I know firsthand what it is to get your child ripped from you and lose complete hope and have a system that is more powerful than you, accusing you of something that you weren't responsible for. Not saying that they're not on all levels, but I think we advocate more for them because we understand and can connect for them. And I think society or foster parents in a whole need to understand, like, there's nothing difference between me and them. They just don't have someone that's walking alongside of them. And how great is it that you have the opportunity to actually fight and advocate for them? And that's something I really preach and share about, is that I'm here to change the conversation. And I remind parents to remember their why. My why is to advocate for the kids, that no matter what the cost is. So if I had to lose my son because I needed to show other people that this system is completely broken and that there's a power that's being stepped over, then that's what I had to do. I had to realize that was God's plan. And I was going to fight because I had nothing to lose. Right. And we got our son back because of that fight.
Wow. I asked you if you saw yourself in these parents, because a lot of them have dealt with different types of trauma, as you have, and as many people have. Many people listening probably have dealt with different types of trauma. But I wonder if you ever see your dad in them, and how hard, or your father. I don't know if you just like to call him father, but do you see him in these parents as well? And is that excruciating?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, we've had a dad accused of sexual abuse, and, and of course it was really hard to sit and hear that accusation, because as my human form, I'm going to be like, that's disgusting. How can you do that? But again, I have to remember, it's really easy for me not to see him, I guess, now, because I'm in a place where my dad has stepped over boundaries and really hurt me as a child. He was sick. And bipolarness was not something that was really talked about. It wasn't diagnosed. It wasn't accepted, really. It was just like, hey, get over it sort of situation. And so it's not that I don't hold him accountable for what he's done to us. It's just that I see what would it have been if maybe the system was changed back then for mental health. Like maybe he would have been a good dad. And I try to focus on the good moments with him and stuff. And so, yes, it's hard, but I really believe that it's not my place to judge. And I think if I am really walking out my faith in full spirit, then I need to do and love boldly and deeply and know that someone else died for my sins. So I need to be able to die for his sin.
Mm.
So,
Wow. It seems like you've learned a lot about grace.
yeah.
It seems like grace is something that you practice
Yeah.
regularly. Um,
That was actually the first word that the Lord gave me when I became a Christian. And I thought a lot of it had to do with other people because I have a temper. I won't lie, I have a temper. And so I get mad at people. I'm like, grace, 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 grace. And then like finally the Lord was like, no, that's not for them. That's for you. Like, give yourself grace to not be perfect. Give yourself grace that healing is going to take years. Like once you finally are healed, I'll call you upstairs, sort of situation. And so I really walk into any relationship of like, well, I wonder what they're going through. Oh, they kind of gave me a nasty response. Well, grace.
mhm.
Sorry you're having a bad day. Let's redo this, sort of situation.
Wow. We're human. I try to practice grace too, and we're humans and
Yeah.
we have these human brains, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
How do you continually go back to grace when you are in those moments where you start to judge or you have a preconceived notion about someone? How do you recenter yourself?
I think my biggest healing piece is beforehand, I would hold that in.
Mm.
And so when you're judging other people or when you've messed up, say, perfect example as a mom, I yell at my kids. And so of course we as moms are like, oh, I'm a horrible mom. Why did, he choose me to raise these kids? Even as an advocate of foster care, like I yell at the kids because we're not we're not supposed to see this hurt and pain. We're not supposed to deal with this trauma in this life, right? And so I am not properly equipped. Honestly, when kids or people are being trained for foster care, you take 30 hours of in a classroom that does not prepare you for the trauma and the experiences, right? And so I think the biggest healing piece that I could give anyone is being vulnerable and sharing that vulnerability and speaking truth in what's going on in your life so that no one can take a hold and bring shame to what the message is. So if I messed up as a mom, I'm going to sit here and say, yeah, I messed up as a mom. If mine and my husband's relationship isn't perfect, it's not perfect. Yeah, he drives me crazy, like as a, trauma survivor, like I repeat the cycle, but knowing that I can stop it and go back to my skills and reset those is a big thing on how I can give myself grace because I'm
Mhm.
no longer allowing society to tell me that I have to live, do, and be perfect. And none of us are perfect. And I wish people would stop selling that perfection feed on social media because you're not going to get that from me and I'm not going to sit in that place with you.
Mhm. You are accepting that you're a human.
Yeah.
It's way easier to offer grace to someone who is a human than to someone you expect to be perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Through this journey as a foster parent, what have you learned about trauma?
That trauma is not a one and done.
Mhm.
And again, that goes back to what I said earlier. Society thinks that what we learn as children build our foundation, right? And so if you are living in pure trauma, you are not actually living in the place of finding out who you are or learning proper skills. I wasn't allowed to speak. I wasn't allowed to cry. I was 35 before I actually cried.
Wow.
Um, and so you live in this place of not really knowing who you were created to be. Because you were never given the opportunity to really live in that place. You were living in the place of stuff and don't be your true self, because if you are, you might get hurt.
Mm.
And so I live in this place that I'm not going to hide who I am. I'm going to ask all the questions. I might say something that might offend you, and I'm sorry about that, but that's not what I really am trying to do. I'm trying to connect and learn. And so I really want people to understand that survivors are still surviving. They're just learning new skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm learning to survive, to be a mom, and the world says I need to be this way, but I'm learning to work through skills and figure out who I am in this moment and to serve my family in the middle of all of it.
Mm-hmm. And I
If that,
think we're in
that
a
makes
time and space where what you just said probably applies to more than just child abuse survivors, but
100%.
even just kids of the 90s.
Mhm.
If you were sold one thing, we really weren't equipped with a lot of those tools even a decade ago, even two
Yeah.
decades ago. And so now we have this opportunity to learn new tools, and that's okay that we're learning now and we're readjusting now. I love that, what you shared. What is the best part of fostering?
Um, Seeing a broken story come together.
Mm-hmm.
It's we live in such a negative life, or a negative world, I feel. Um where the negative stories overpower. I mean, even when you hear about foster care, the story is, we've hurt a child, and so we're on the news because a child has died in our, or been hurt in our custody, or we're doing it for the money, which is a joke. um, and so I wish people saw more of the redemption story that we get to see, of a child that comes into your home broken, not wanting a hug, not wanting to talk to you, to even the parents that, you keep at a distance, but now we're welcoming them in and taking them to church with us, or we're taking them to see Santa Claus with their kids, or we're providing moments that they just never had before. And um, for me, it's a full circle of, again, like what someone was willing to sacrifice for me to live in this world, like to see his love for us come full circle.
What does it mean to you to be able to show them that they are worthy of love just by being alive, just being them?
Um, Gosh, I just think that it's a reminder that we all deserve it. Like, again, it's not conditional. So I think just showing them that they are seen in the ugly spot that they're at right now, it's something that a lot of them haven't been able to see. And so for me, just giving them that space, I mean, I guess it brings me back to my childhood, right? Just allowing a little girl that never knew what love really felt like to be able now to give it to someone else in a way that they've never felt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That must be a pretty incredible experience to be part of that.
Yeah.
What have they taught you about love?
That it's not perfect. That what my life looks like doesn't have to look like theirs. Like theirs doesn't have to look like mine for them to love their kids,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of foster parents get stuck on, well, the kids aren't going to have the same things when they go back to their parents. Yeah, but they're going to have their love. They might not have the PS4. They might have a 2-bedroom instead of a 5-bedroom, but there is something for them to be raised with their own family that we as adoption or foster parents will never be able to give them. And I think, again, the story is sold that for our end, that foster care and adoption doesn't have trauma. A lot of adoptive parents think when you adopt a child, oh, done. It's never, there's nothing else attached to it. But Adoption itself is attached to trauma, and your child is going to have skills and questions. And you, as a parent, need to be very comfortable in answering those things, because if you don't, you're basically shaming your child. You're not allowing your child to know their true self and where they came from, whether it's ugly or not. And then you are actually just continuing the trauma cycle for that child.
Wow. It sounds hard, but such an incredible blessing for not only the children, but for yourself to be part of.
Yeah.
I want to end with the question that I ask everyone, which is, this podcast is about finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in-between. What is your tip to doing that?
I think really honestly, just taking it day by day. In the foster care world, we are really always looking for the next moment. Okay, if I get to this life meeting, if I get to this 6 months, if I get to this court case, then I'll be happy. I'll know what is coming next. And the reality is they could show up on my doorstep and remove my son and I'd never get to see him again. And so I feel I learned a lot our first time saying yes, because that's where I lived. And I feel I had a lot of joy stolen from me because I wasn't being truthful to what was really going on in our life. And so I think taking it day by day and being very vulnerable and truthful about what that day looks like, not only to you, but the people that are walking on and watching you.
Mm-hmm.
People are watching.
I have not heard that answer for that question ever yet on, more than 150 episodes. So I am so thankful for that, because I think that is incredible advice. We covered a lot. I think we could have like a 5-part series on all of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, but I appreciate your time so much. And I am so thankful for this conversation. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I just think Bonnie is absolutely incredible. I'm going to post her information in the show notes, and I want to thank you for being here on Happiness and Progress.